All right. Well, good evening and welcome to our Fall into OBOB 2023 event for Wink by Rob Harrell. I'm Julie, the events manager at Roundabout Books in beautiful Bend, Oregon. Just a reminder to everyone on the Zoom tonight, this event is being recorded. So if you don't want to be on video because it will be posted to YouTube, just leave your video off. And later we will unmute people to ask questions, but do remain muted while the author is speaking so that we give them our fullest attention. We love that we are able to once again host OBOB events for students all around Oregon, not just in the Bend area. So we're so excited that people are joining from Portland, just everywhere across the state, and are so excited about the Oregon Battle of the Books. We have a few more events left for this season, and then we'll see everyone in the spring for the actual regionals. And again, we'll do this next year. What's really fun is this is our second event with Rob Harrell. We were so fortunate to talk with him last year about the Life of Zarf. And at that event, we talked about Wink a little bit, and I was so lucky to then have read it. So I'm really excited about this because I found it to be one of just the best middle grade books I've read in a long time. I was laughing. I don't know that I cried, but I definitely felt emotions as I was reading Wink. So here's a little background for those of you who may not have gotten through the book yet or are picking it up for your OBOB team. Wink is a hilarious and heart-wrenching story about surviving middle school and an unthinkable diagnosis while embracing life's weirdness. Ross Maloy just wants to be a normal seventh grader. He doesn't want to lose his hair or wear a weird hat or deal with the disappearing friends who don't know what to say to the cancer kid. But with his recent diagnosis of a rare eye cancer, blending in is off the table. Based on Rob Harrell's real-life experience and packed with comic panels and spot art, this incredibly personal and poignant novel is an unforgettable, heartbreaking, hilarious, and uplifting story of survival and finding the music, magic, and laughter in life's weirdness. Rob is joining us tonight from the East Coast, Eastern Time. So thank you so much for being here so late into the evening. He's also the creator of the Life of Zarf series, the graphic novel Monster on the Hill, and writes and draws the long-running daily comic strip Adam at Home. Rob Harrell, thank you again so much for being here with Roundabout Books to talk about Wink for the Oregon Battle of the Books.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm honored, and hopefully this helps with somebody's Battle of the Books trivia questions or whatever may come up. So
absolutely. So I know you have a short presentation. So if you want to screen share, that is available.
Okay. I'm going to screen share, and then I'm just going to go through a quick presentation that kind of tells you how I got here from the beginning, and then we can open it up to questions, and hopefully you have some questions, and we can just have a discussion about Wink and about books. Okay, here we go. Sharing my screen. Let me see. Are you seeing Wink?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, good. And you're just seeing Wink, right? Not all the other stuff around it? Okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I just want to talk a little bit. Yeah, I go around and I do school visits, and I talk some about how I went from being a fourth grader who loved comics and loved drawing, and how I got to now where I get to do it as a job and sit here and come up with stories, and my dog sleeps at my feet. Kind of awesome. So just real quick, I'll run through this. When I was in fourth grade, my best friend Steve Ferris and I decided to put out our own magazine. We were really into drawing, and we were kind of competitive about it. So we put out a magazine called Freak Out Magazine, and we sold subscriptions. And it was kind of a little bit of a ripoff of, there was a magazine that was really popular at the time called Mad Magazine. And it was sort of our version of Mad Magazine. So here you go. You can see up here, that's up in the left, that's Henry the cat. That was my first character I ever came up with. And then I drew Bob the Blob here with the clown nose and the cigar. And Steve drew the mouse, and he just called him the mouse. So we put out issues, and we ended up only putting out one issue because I ran off the copies at my dad's office, and he pointed out that it cost money. So we ended up having to give all the quarters back. It was a quarter for subscription, and we ended up having to give them back. So it was an early lesson in business. But the cool thing that happened, and what really counted, is that I loved writing the cartoons. I loved drawing the cartoons. I love seeing people's reactions to it. And so I was hooked. I told my parents then that I wanted to be a cartoonist when I grew up. I wanted to be like Charles Schulz, who came up with Peanuts. And that was my big goal. So I started working all through middle school, high school, college. I did comic strips, and wanted to get one syndicated, which means that, it's in the newspaper every day. When I got out of college, that still hadn't happened. I needed to make a living. So I started working as an illustrator. And so I went to downtown Indianapolis and started showing my portfolio around. And I started getting all kinds of work. I did stuff for magazines and ad agencies and whoever would buy my artwork. So here's an illustration I did for like a small legal magazine. It was about students getting out for the Christmas break. This is one I did. It's Leroy the Lizard is his name. And I don't remember what the product was for. I honestly can't remember, but I remember the tagline had something about Leroy the Lizard lapping lemonade from his leafy lair. And I do know that he came before the Geico lizard. So he may look like him, but he predates him. But eventually something was kind of missing. I think what I wanted to do was be telling stories and coming up with my own characters and plots. So eventually I came up with the idea for my first comic strip, which was called Big Top. And it got picked up by a syndicate, like the syndicate that did Doonesbury and Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes. And it was my life dream. I mean, this is what I'd always wanted to do. So Big Top was about this kid, Pete, who was growing up in the circus, and he was in charge of all these crazy animals. Actually, he was the clown wrangler, was his main job. So he was in charge of this clown named Stucco. And Stucco, I'm not a big fan of clowns. So Stucco was a bit more like a wild animal, and was always getting into trouble. Like one time he ate something wrong and blew up the size of Godzilla, became Clownzilla, and attacked the town. And he had to put that out. There was also this little poodle named Dusty the Poodle, who was just a little jerk of a poodle. I can't tell you how much fun it is to write for a character that's a jerk. So he was a fun character. He kind of took this strip over. But I did, it was 7 days a week. I did 6 days a week. I did black and white 4-panel comics. And then on Sunday, I'd get to stretch out and draw some weird looking clowns in this example, just because, again, they kind of creep me out. And I will tell you, this is 100% true. The clown on the left there in the green is based on my 7th grade science teacher, Mr. Stewart. And if you could see Mr. Stewart, I should get a picture of his yearbook photo, because it might not be the nicest thing I've ever done, actually, drawing a picture that looked that much like him, but I did. So I'll get into this when I talk about Wink a little bit, but I was doing my strip Big Top when I got sick with cancer, which is what, the book Wink is about. And it was the hardest decision I ever had to make professionally. I eventually had to end Big Top. And it wasn't because I was so sick that I couldn't do the strip. In fact, I did the strip every day, all through my treatments. And I think that doing comics really helped me it helped me be in a better state of mind, really. So I felt like the comic characters in my strip kind of went through it with me. But then it was about a year later when all the medical bills came pouring in, and I realized, unfortunately, having cancer is expensive. So I had to quit the job. I did all kinds of odd jobs. I painted for a while. I used to film all kinds of commission meetings down in Texas. But eventually my syndicate came back to me and asked me if I would take over a long running strip since the 80s called Adam at Home. I took over Adam at Home. They told me I could kind of make it my own. And so I've now been doing it for 14 years, which is crazy to me, every day for 14 years. And it's about this dad. He's a writer and he lives at home and he's addicted to coffee and naps and terrible ideas. So I can relate to him. So that's been really fun doing that. But while I was doing these other jobs, like I said, I would film these commission meetings. Some of them I would get incredibly bored while I was filming their meetings. So I did what anybody would do and I started drawing monsters. So one day I drew this character. You could see right there, I drew him right on the agenda. I think I was filming the Texas Board of Education that day, and it was awful. So I drew his face, and I just thought, man, I like his face. He looks disgruntled and unhappy. And it finally led to my first book, which was my graphic novel, Monster on the Hill. I'll tell you briefly what Monster on the Hill is about. It's set in the 1800s in England, but it was in England where every town has its own scary monster that lives on the hill outside of town. And about once a week or so, they come roaring into town and they scare everybody half to death. And the townspeople love it. It's almost like the roller coaster, or it's their tourist attraction. And then, the people get scared by the monster and then they buy t-shirts with the monster on it and they buy action figures and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, this town has a depressed monster who hasn't attacked in years. He mostly takes naps and lays around. So eventually they send this doctor, you see him there in the carriage, this disgraced doctor. They send him up the hill to talk to the monster and see if he can teach him how to be scary again. So they decide to set off on a road trip to go see some of his old monster buddies and relearn how to be scary. And it turns out there's a real monster that's attacking cities and they have to sort of rise to the occasion. So something weird happened with that book that has never happened again yet. Hollywood called and they wanted to make it into a movie. So they made it into an animated movie. It took them 8 years and it's out now on Paramount Plus. If you get a chance, the movie is called Rumble. I don't know if anybody has seen Rumble. I will tell you this. It is almost 100% completely, totally, absolutely nothing like my book. They just, it's what Hollywood does sometimes. They just take an idea and they run with it. They saw mine, my book was about a depressed monster and they thought, well, what if the monsters wrestle? So now it's got a big wrestling theme to it. And I'll show you, they changed the character designs. Like there's my Rayburn. That's how he looks in my book. And in the movie, he looks like this. They went with a slightly different look. They wanted an out of shape wrestler type. And then there was sort of a T-Rex character that was like his best friend in my book. And instead of his best friend, now he's his enemy. And instead of looking like a T-Rex, now he looks like this. He's kind of a big shark-looking character. But, the animation was really cool. It was a very cool experience. They would fly me out to Hollywood ever so often and show me what they were working on and ask my opinion. And then they would pat me on the head and send me back to Indiana. And that's just kind of how Hollywood works, I guess. But so jumping back in time, I had gotten done writing Monster on the Hill and I was starting to trust myself as a writer. I really enjoyed the writing part. So I came up with a series of books called Life of Zarf. And there were 3 Life of Zarf books. And they're all about a troll named Zarf who's in 7th grade in a middle school in fairy tale world. So he goes to school with characters from fairy tales. In the first one, the king gets kidnapped. Second one, he goes up against the big bad wolf. The third one, they're on a deserted island and there's sea monsters and all sorts of things. They were so much fun. So these books take place years after the fairy tales that we know. So for example, his best friend is Kevin Little Pig. His dad was one of the famous little pigs. That he's actually the one that built the brick house that the big bad wolf couldn't blow down. So now they're all wealthy. They've started building brick houses for everyone in fairy tale world. And Zarf's grandfather actually was the one that went up against the Billy Goat Scruff in that story. And then another example is Goldilocks is in my book, but she's now grown up and she's now Miss Locks, the lunch lady, and she's slopping out porridge for kids. And she's a great character. She helps the gang a lot. Okay, so that brings me to Wink, which is why we're here, and the book that's that you guys are talking about for OBOB. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I wrote Wink the way I did. I was in my 30s when I got sick and when I went through my cancer treatments. Here's basically what happened to me. I one day my eye swelled up again the next day. I went to some doctors and they couldn't figure out what was going on. So finally they got me some scans, and they found out that it was this incredibly rare form of cancer. It was literally the 25th reported case of it ever. And it scared my doctors, and they freaked myself and my wife out pretty good. And they sent us off to see some specialists. One of the specialists shows up in the book. You may remember there's a doctor in the book who looks like a popsicle, and she's the one that comes in and says that they're going to have to scoop his eye out. That was a real woman, and she's not my favorite person. I saw her for about 2 minutes, and she said, we're going to blind you in both eyes, remove part of your face, and we're going to do that the day after tomorrow. Then my wife and I were devastated, and we sort of sat around trying to figure out how to cope with this. And then something crazy happened. My dad was an attorney in Bloomington, Indiana, thousands of miles away, and he was telling some people about what was going to happen to me. And it's just so happened they shared some office space with some medical people. And these medical guys said, hey, there's a doctor in town who's working on this experimental treatment called proton radiotherapy. They said, you ought to talk to him. He might be able to help. And my dad called him. And about an hour later, that doctor called me and said, get on a plane. I can save your vision. And so we did. We got on a plane. And a day later, I met with him. And he ended up saving the vision in my left eye. I ended up losing the vision in my right eye. But I consider myself, honestly, one of the luckiest people, on the planet. So I had this story, and then I went through 8 weeks of radiation, and I did my comic strip all through it. And it was a pain. I had to wear that stupid cowboy hat that's in the book. Fortunately I lived in Texas at the time, so I didn't stand out quite as bad, but it wasn't my style, let's put it that way. And I was thinking about how to write it as a book. I started thinking about writing it as just like an adult memoir. And then at one point I was thinking about writing it with my Big Top characters from the circus comic strip I did. Because I kind of felt like they were with me through the whole thing. And so I thought about that for a while. And then I started working on it as a graphic novel, even at one point. So skip forward to about 8 years ago. We moved back up to Indiana. And it just so happens that my best friend's daughter, who was in school, she got diagnosed with cancer. And I don't say that to scare anybody. She's fine now, and I'm fine. But at the time, it was really scary. So we ended up talking a lot about our stories, and I saw this real lack of empathy from other students at her school. She had some mean things said behind her back. She had some friends who just stopped hanging around with her. And I started thinking about, how much harder it was at that age. How glad I was that I had gone through it at the age I was. And so I sort of started coming up with this idea of combining our stories a little bit, and setting it in middle school in a place where I could really talk about empathy and how important it is to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So I wanted him to have an amazing support system like I did. My family was amazing through that time. My friends were amazing. My wife was my rock throughout that whole thing. I will say, I couldn't give Ross a wife because he's in 7th grade. That just would have been weird. So instead, he gets Abby, his best friend, and Abby is sort of a stand-in for my wife. She's quite a bit different than my wife is, but just as far as the way that she could joke with him and support him, I think everybody in a situation like that could use a friend like Abby. And then, some of the other tools that I use to get through, I'm a huge music nerd, so I listen to music all the time. My radiation tech and I really did listen to all kinds of louder and louder music, partially to keep me awake during the treatments, so I wouldn't move my eye. I also wanted him to have comics. So like I did Big Top, I wanted him to have something, so he starts drawing Batpig. And for those of you who've read the book, you know that first he actually starts out drawing Batbutt, but he gets in trouble for that. And that is 100% based on a true story. I had a character named Batbutt when I was in grade school, and I got in trouble for drawing that. But, having that character and him showing his comics that he draws really gave me another way to show inside his brain and how he uses his creativity and his sense of humor to help him get through what is, an incredibly scary, difficult situation. I thought I'd show you guys, how DVDs have, or how you get like Easter eggs or bonus extras. I'd show you guys a couple. I did about 300 illustrations for Wink at one point, and we ended up only using about 80 of them because it was all about finding the right tone. So here's a drawing from the beginning of the book where Ross is about to go through his first treatment. Another thing, I originally had these cartoon versions in my head of some of the characters, so I'll show you a couple. I don't want it to ruin it if you had ideas of what they looked like in your head. But like Jimmy, the guy, the sort of bully type who ends up revealing there's a little bit more to him. That's sort of how he looked. He was very much based on a kid I went to middle school with. And then Abby, that's kind of how I pictured Abby. And then it was funny, at that point, she was obsessed with the band ELO. And then my agent, who's younger than me, didn't know if ELO was a real band. And that broke my heart. So I ended up switching it to Vampire Weekend, which is a little more current band. And actually it fits more with her because she's into, like Godzilla and monster movies and things like that. So but so the book came out and it's done very well. I'm kind of blown away that it's in, I think, 14 languages now, which I don't say that to brag. I just say that because I can't believe it, frankly. But so after that, my publisher was interested in if I wanted to do some more with Batpig. So I've done 3 Batpig graphic novels now. The first one is called When Pigs Fly. And you get to see how mild-mannered Gary Yorkshire goes from being just a normal pig to being a superhero. You get to see him go up against some horrible villains, like this is Repto Man, who is a magic-obsessed, lizard that gets blown up to the size of Godzilla. You get to meet his best friends, Brooke the Bat and Carl the Fish. And Carl's just like a normal student bopping around the halls, but occasionally he has to jump in a toilet to, get wet, or, a glass of water, pitcher, whatever it takes. The second book came out last year. It's called Too Pig to Fail. And it is all about, they get into all kinds of more adventures. They run into some bored aliens, which you see here. And eventually they have to do battle with a giant bumble kitten, which is horrifying to Carl the fish because, cats like to eat fish. And then the third book just came out this year. It's called Go Pig or Go Home. It's in it, the gang go off to summer camp, and they run into some new characters there, like Grumbles, who is a lake monster with a bit of a stomach issue. That's how they can hear him coming, as they hear him his stomach grumbling under the water. And then maybe my all-time favorite character I've ever come up with is in this book, and his name is Sharkraham Lincoln, and he is half Abraham Lincoln and half Great White Shark. So he has the mind of our greatest president, but he also has this urge to eat fish and schools of fish and baby seals and all that sort of thing. So they have their work cut out for them with that. So okay, I'm gonna unshare, and then I'll tell you just a little. Let's see, stop share. There you go. You see me again? Okay. I thought I'd just let you know what I'm working on now. I'm working on another middle grade book. It's almost done. I'm probably gonna put the finishing touches on it this week, and it'll be out next fall. It's very similar in tone to Wink. It handles a more serious subject, but with a lot of humor. This one's all about anxiety, and it's something I think we're all dealing with, and kids and adults alike. And it's called Popcorn, and I can't wait for people to read it. I think it's very Wink-like, and maybe even more broadly, applicable to people, just because we're all dealing with it. And then a couple of cool things. We've got somebody who's interested in making Wink into a movie. We'll see if that happens. They've got some pull. That would be super exciting. And then actually we're pitching next week Batpig as an animated series, and we have a producer and showrunner and a head writer, all this that are involved with it. I think it would be so much fun to see Batpig flying around on screens soon. So that's where I am now. That's I think, at this point, I'd just throw it open. Hope you guys have some questions that I can answer. Maybe some questions that will help you when it comes to the actual final OBOB Battle of the Books. So let me know if anybody has some questions about Wink. I'm happy to talk about. Oh, I was going to show you one thing first. I talked about how I wasn't sure how to write Wink at first. And at one point I was thinking about it as a graphic novel. I don't know if this is going to show up very well. That is how bad I looked when I was going through my radiation treatments. And so that was a drawing of me as an adult. Here's another one. I was actually waiting in a CVS for a prescription. And I thought, man, I would just scare anybody if they saw me. Like, my eye was all bright red and was wearing my cowboy hat. And then I even started doing it, writing it out with the comic strip characters. Like, here's when he first sits up and sees the design is all swollen up. That's Wink the bear. So, every time I start a book, I start a folder. Here's my big top cancer idea. It was the original folder. And then I just keep brainstorming and working on it. And eventually it sort of magically turns into a book somehow. So any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, so if anyone has questions, excuse me, you can put them in the chat window, or you can use the raise hand function and I can unmute you so you can ask. While people might be forming their questions, I kind of wanted to ask one of you. Yeah. You kind of mentioned it, but how do you write a book about a topic like cancer that can feel really scary? In middle school, for instance, one of my friends, and I don't remember all of the details leading up to it, but something happened and she broke her leg, but it was because she had bone cancer. And the tumor had weakened it enough. And so then she went through her treatments and she was basically like casted and she had to be in a wheelchair.
Yeah. And
she was out of school a lot. But at the same time, like, I'm not sure we all maybe put it together that, it could have been even worse. Right. So how do you approach that in a middle grade and talk about something that is kind of scary?
Um, you know, part of the reason that I did it was when I had cancer, somebody gave me Lance Armstrong's book, you know, the cyclist, and his book is all about how he got brain cancer, and for lack of a better word, he sort of handled it like a superhuman, you know, like the book was sort of him standing on a mountaintop, like, I will beat cancer. And, you know, days after his brain surgery, he went out and rode 50 miles on his bike or whatever it was. And in some ways, that almost made me feel worse. So I kind of wanted to tell a story that was warts and all, you know, told about the times when you're really scared and the times about how it really was. And so one thing that, and this was a hard thing to pitch to my publisher and to my agent and all that, was the idea that I wanted it to be funny. And just because I wanted it to book, I didn't want it to be a misery to read. I wanted the book to be something that you want to read, and therefore you get through it and hopefully, you know, get whatever lessons might come out of the book. So I, but I struggled with that, and I probably rewrote this book, you know, in total 6 or 7 times, because I just kept wanting to get the tone right, the sense of humor right, and I didn't want anybody to think that I was being flippant about cancer or about how serious or scary it is. So I tried to balance it. You know, I think there are scenes where the real fear and the real seriousness of it comes through. But then, you know, I've had a saying that I said since the beginning of starting to write this book. I said, you know, a doctor can come in, sit down, and give you the worst diagnosis of your life. But if they get up to turn around to walk out of the room and they have a milk dud stuck to their butt, it's still funny. Like, that part of your brain still functions, and you can still find things funny. And that's something I found while I was going through it, that even in the worst times, humor can see you through, and humor, you know, your humor gene doesn't shut down.
Right.
So that was how I tried to handle it, was by balancing it with you know, and then also I think I made it less scary by giving him a really nice support system, his dad and his stepmother and Frank, the tech, and that was part of what helped me get through it, because I had guys like Jerry who hang out, you know, who would hang out in the waiting room, and you'd sit around and have coffee with them and talk with them, and you know, talking with other humans and being with other humans makes it bearable, I think. So hopefully that all came through in the book.
Yeah, Frank was definitely my favorite. I have an uncle who, I think if he hadn't gone into the profession he did, may have wanted to be a musician, because to this day he still seeks out really random bands and then burns CDs for me and my mom, and we're like, who is this? And he's like, just give it a try. And we're like, okay. He's just so excited about music. Like, it's just one of his favorite things. And I mean, he has turned me on to some bands, and at the same time he's given me some stuff that I'm like, this isn't for me, but thanks.
This is too weird. Yeah, sure.
We have a question in the chat. We have Cliff, who is wondering what inspired the spit jar.
I'm going to be 100% honest with the spit jar, and nobody get mad at me for being honest. Okay, I grew up in Southern Indiana, and, you know, I was going to school in, let's see, I would have been in like around 1980 when I was his age. And a lot of kids did chewing tobacco, and they'd have a, you know, a tin of it, and they'd have it in their back pocket. And so I originally started writing the character. I mean, the guy who it was based on was always doing that. And basically my publisher and said, you can't put that in a middle grade book. You can't put tobacco in there. And you know, Scholastic book fairs will never touch it. All these kind of things they told me. And so they're like, okay, you got to take that out or give them a different, you know, something. And And then I just had this idea of like, what if he just spits in a jar anyway,
Yeah.
and take that out. So that's actually what it's based on, and I kind of like it because it's such a weird, bizarre thing that he does. And then, when they get in the fight in the classroom and the jar breaks and the teacher slides in it, and it's just so gross. Oh, just ugh. And so, I think that's part of what I love about the character of Jimmy, is that he is kind of gross and rough around the edges, and you start out thinking he's a pure bully, and I'll be honest, when I started writing that character, I didn't know he was going to have this arc where he ended up becoming kind of an ally and a friend and bandmate. So he really surprised me, and maybe that was part of what made that happen. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
We have another question. Have you ever visited kids in the hospital dealing with cancer, talking to them, using Wink as the entry point for them sharing their own experiences?
So I haven't done that exactly. I would love to, and I've tried to figure out how to make that work. And I've reached out. I've gotten close sometimes. Just haven't quite figured out the mechanism. I would love to go to Riley or what's the big one, St. Jude's, or or even just a local hospital here. I will say what I have done, which was really interesting, is through my cartooning. I ended up getting to take some trips where I went to military hospitals and drew for patients, and did drawings that they could send home to their kids. And we ended up going to Iraq, and we were in Baghdad, and we went to all these bases and drew for patients, and it was so rewarding. So I would love to. I would love to find a way to make that work where, it's interesting because I think if I approach a hospital, I think the initial reaction is they think I'm trying to sell my book. And it's like, no. I really would love to just come and
Yeah.
And so maybe I just need to leave the book out of it, and then I could mention that while I'm there or something.
Yeah. Or maybe just like how to approach the kids and their families, saying this author wants to,
Yeah.
I can kind of understand that.
And it's also such a scary time that, I'm not sure everybody's open to somebody walking in and saying, hey, let me tell you about my experience. Because everybody's experience is different. And even with my experience, mine was really scary. And that, I talk about how I could have been blinded in both eyes and I could have lost half my face. Well, there are people that does actually happen to. And so I worry about, I think I got very, very lucky. So, I don't want to make somebody feel worse. That would be the worst.
Right. Well, and pediatric oncology is a very, that's a very difficult, just a very different specialty too. So Natalie just has a comment, and she just said, I love the book Life of Zarf. So I just want to pass it along to you.
I love to hear that. Yes.
We do have another question. Was Dime Slot your real nickname?
Yeah, it was. This is kind of an interesting, there's another author, and he's a cartoonist as well. He does a comic strip called Leo, if you've ever seen that, Lio. And his name is Mark Tutuli, and he's written some books. He wrote graphic novels called The Big Break and Short and Skinny, Desmond Puckett, and he's done some picture books as well. But anyway, we have this big cartoonist convention every year, and it's an awards thing, but it's really just an excuse for us all to get together and hang out. And he's one of my best friends in cartooning, and the first time he saw me after I'd gotten my slot, which here we'll lean it and you can see my slot, I walked up and he just said, hey, what's up, Dime Slot? And so for the longest time, that was the name of the book. I was going to call it Dime Slot, and then my publisher thought kids might not know what a dime slot was, and I asked that question at schools a lot of times, and I'm kind of amazed at how many people don't know what a dime slot is. But it was just, in a vending machine or whatever, or a phone, if you had to put in a dime. That would be a little
Right.
slot to it. So yeah.
I think that still comes up when we talk to kids about like payphones. You know, my nephew is 5.5, and he would have no idea what a landline is or what a,
Right.
all the things that you and I
Yeah.
really remember. Cliff also asked, how long did it take you to write Wink?
Wink took me about 2 years, and that's partially because I wrote and rewrote it and rewrote it. And there were so many versions of Wink. The first version of Wink, if you'd read it, it read much more like a Diary of a Wimpy Kid kind of book. And then it just became deeper, and the storylines got deeper, and deep is a cheesy word I don't like to use, but it just filled in. The book filled in, and the book became something bigger than I had really intended when I first started writing it. And through that process, I started to trust myself as a writer too. And I'll say the exact same thing has happened with this book, Popcorn, that's coming out next fall. I started out, it was called Picture Day, and it's all about this kid having this, like, the worst picture day ever. And then it sort of slowly evolved into this book about anxiety, and there's some stuff in there about Alzheimer's. There's a lot of I sort of ended up writing a better book than I intended to, which is a great thing to have happen. So I think I say that about Popcorn, and nobody's read it. I hope you guys don't hate it. But I think if you liked Wink, you'll like Popcorn.
Well, that's good. And even if it doesn't get picked up for any OBOB, we'll definitely have another event with you, because this is, your last event got so many views on our YouTube, and we've sold so many copies of Wink even before OBOB. Natalie, I see your question about why Rob wrote Wink. He actually talks about that at the beginning of our Zoom, but we've recorded this, so I'm going to send it to you so you can watch the whole thing, since I think you came in a few minutes late. So I want to get to Cliff's question real quick, though. He wants to know whatever happened to Abby after she moved.
Well, and I've had ideas for a sequel. One idea that I've had that I think would be really fun would be to every 5 years write a book that chronologically is 5 years later, or I don't know if people would stick with reading those books, but I'd love to know. But in my mind, I like to think that her dad's job only lasts a couple of years, probably up there, and then maybe she comes back. That, or they end up at the same college, or that sort of thing. Because I think Abby and I think they stay best friends, through Zoom and texting and phone and all that. Because I just think she's such a great friend, and she's one of my favorite characters too, because I just think she's got a great spirit, and she, whether they're friends or they start dating later in life or something, I think they're just meant to be close to each other.
Yeah, those are really special friendships for kids to have. I hope kids realize that you can stay friends with somebody for a really long time, even if you move and come back. How accurate are the details of the radiation therapy?
They're pretty accurate. I didn't hold back on that, and that was one of the things that I was pretty adamant about with my editors and all that I wanted to kind of go into some of the for starters, just like what a pain it was. That eye goop, Batpig fights the eye goop at one point, but I had to wear this eye goop. I still have to wear it every night to bed. It's been 17 years, and I still have to wear it to bed every night because I don't have tears in that eye. And if I don't, I wake up and my eyelid stuck to my eyeball, and that's not fun. That goop stains everything. If I go stay at somebody's house, I bring my own pillow so I won't stain their pillowcases. But then I had to wear the hat. I did go for 8 weeks of treatment. The X was real, and they did tell me just don't move your eye, or bad things will happen. And and then there was a lot of fatigue with it, and then just some really scary stuff. And my eye ended up getting all red, and well, it was wasn't pretty. But I wanted all that in there because again, I think like I said, I wanted to tell the story warts and all, and that means the moments when you break down and cry, and the moments when you just want to hide under your covers, or the moments where maybe you lash out at a good friend, just because there's so many emotions in you, that you get overwhelmed by it, and you want to, and it's unfortunate, but all that is part of it. And so with a sense of humor, I wanted to tell the story in a way that would make somebody who's going through it, or someone who had a friend who was going through it, or a kid that was going through it, that would ultimately make them feel less alone. And I think part of the way that you do that is to share the good and the bad. And so, yeah.
Well, and I really appreciate, I hope as people are hearing more about your book, I mean, it's not new, but it's not old,
Right.
and just more people find out about it. And as kids read it, this is what I would hope from this is that this happened to you as an adult. So adults go through this stuff, right? Like we get bad news or something happens and we don't know what to do. We still don't have all of the answers of, I can't, I lost my job or something even like that, where you're like, what am I going to do? And so I hope that kids know that when they're feeling that, so are adults. Like we're not, we don't have the answers. Like anything you're feeling, I promise you, we're all still feeling it too. Like I'm excited to read your book about anxiety because I got to tell you, like all the time. But I think that there's, it's one of those things too. And maybe like that's a little bit too why, Abby wants him to stop maybe complaining or, talking about stuff because she's got problems too, right? Like everybody's got something going on. And but when kids have their feelings, maybe they think, oh, I shouldn't because it's not as bad as somebody else's. It's all relative, right? Like whatever you're going through is bad, is whatever you're going through. We have another question.
I've always said that, just real quick, that I think problems are like a gas, and this is getting real science classy on you, but they fill whatever volume they're put in. And someone who may seem like they have the perfect life, there may be something that's just eating at them, and in their head, that problem is just as big. And then when something really, really big does come along, it can be overwhelming because of that. I think the main thing I wanted to get across in this book was how important empathy is, and putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah. So we've got 2 more questions, and then I think that will be our end. But who was Sarah based off of, or was it fictional?
The good part of Sarah was based on a girl I went to school with, and who I had a diehard crush on from 5th grade through senior year. And she never did anything awful to me like that. I'll be honest, when I started writing, I wasn't sure who the culprit was. And I still in some ways think that she was sort of led by Denise the Undesirable, or whatever I called her in the book, her friend. But she's not directly based on anybody, but
yeah. And then our final question, and it's kind of a 2-parter, I guess, is were the memes real, or how did you come up with them? I guess that one informs the other.
My friend's daughter, who found out she had cancer. She overheard some really awful things that were said, a couple of jokes and some sort of meaner things that were said behind her back, and she told us about them, and I wanted to work that in there. And memes, I also had an agent who was like, you got to get more social media in there and that sort of thing. And so but then it was perfect because it was visual and I could do drawings of them, and so they were not directly based on what was said to or about her, but they were sort of in that same spirit. There's a weird thing that happens, like when someone famous dies. It feels like 2 or 3 days later, sometimes not even that long, there are jokes going around about it, and it's something that's been happening since I was in grade school, and so there's something there, human nature. I think maybe people, it's a way to hold off the scary thoughts, is to just make a joke about it or something like that. And so and it's the same thing with Isaac. I think Isaac, hopefully, and I've heard some debate on this, on whether he gets redeemed at the end or not of the book, but I like to think that he just couldn't handle it, and finally comes clean about that at the end. And I think Isaac is a real friend. I think he just panicked for a while, and so I have sympathy for Isaac, even though I've heard some people out there who do not. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Humor can be helpful, or humor at someone else's expense is definitely not helpful.
Absolutely. And I think if someone, Sarah, whoever was making those memes, had taken a second to stop and think, what if that was me? And those jokes were being made about me. So I just think empathy is so important, because especially when something scary like that comes along, it could just as well be you. It could just as well be the other person on the other side of you. Things happen, and they can be really scary and challenging. And so why wouldn't you want to be sympathetic to those people and be supportive, and as opposed to making some dumb meme about them. So
Absolutely. Empathy is a really, really fantastic quality in people, and we should have more of it. So we are out of time. So I want to thank everybody who's been here and asking questions. Again, we want to thank Rob Harrell for taking the time. We are recording this, so I will put it on the bookstore's YouTube channel, and then I will send it out to everyone who had registered for tonight. So if you have friends that couldn't make it, maybe they're not doing OBOB, but you think that they would love to hear about this book and love to watch an author talk about their book, please feel free to share it. If you are local to us, come and visit Roundabout Books anytime you want. If you're not, we just want you to visit your local independent bookstore wherever you live, because independent bookstores are what's going to keep the book industry alive.
Oh, here, I have to show you my shirt. Books are magic.
Yay! Books are magic. I love books. I love authors. I love bookstores. I really appreciate everyone who's been here tonight. Please, everyone, say a thank you in the chat, or if you want to unmute, to Rob Harrell for spending time with us. A little round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here,
everybody.
Enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rob, keep us posted about the next book. We'd love to have you back.
Okay, sometime in the fall. Look for it in the fall, and then
I absolutely will. All right, everyone, have a great night. Good luck with OBOB, and just keep reading. It's the best thing you can do for yourself.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all.
Bye. All right.
Bye.